Well, the $200 price point for graphics cards is definitely heating up. And with that, I expect the comment section to probably also heat up with this video. So I'm gonna go ahead and put on some eye protection. Get the amazing sound of planar magnetic headphones with the Hi-Fiman HE4XXs from Drop. The highly efficient magnetic planar design and adjustable fit make them the perfect pair for anyone seeking legendary audio without the legendary price tag. To learn more and to take advantage of the current sale of the Hi-Fiman 4XXs, head to the drop in the link below. All right, so obviously AMD has just launched its 5500 XT 4GB and 8GB cards. The only difference between those two cards is the amount of VRAM on there, which is very much so how they used to do it with the Polaris series with the 480, 470, 580, 570, they'd have a 4GB and 8GB variant, where other than that, the core is the same. So what we did here is we also used a couple of different NVIDIA cards here because we like to show how the competition stacks up versus the price points. So what we did was we took a 1650 and a 1650 Super and a 1660, although this is an expensive 1660, we'll caveat that one in a second, we'll talk about why. To sort of see how the performance is right around that $200 entry point when it comes to the very competitive $200 entry point for graphics cards, because that is, according to the Steam statistics, where most people tend to spend their money in terms of graphics cards, 50 and 60 series cards at 1080p resolution. 1080p is still the overwhelming dominant resolution. So looking at these cards at this price point for 1080p makes perfect sense. Now let's go and talk about what is new with AMD first of all. This is on their 7nm architecture. So it is PCIe 4.0, although this card is nowhere near fast enough to come anywhere close to saturating even PCIe Gen 3. 4.0 is just, quite honestly, a marketing thing. That's because AMD has 4.0 on the Ryzen 3 stuff. You gotta put it on the GPUs too. But with this card, it's not anywhere close to even 4.0, but that's a little bit of a rant. It's also launched with new software, the Adrenalin 2020 series. So the driver for Radeon is a bit different than Nvidia. Where Nvidia has GeForce Experience that is a standalone piece of software that complements your graphics card, it's not required. You don't have to download it. In fact, it's an option that you can uncheck when you download the driver. The driver otherwise is still a very basic GUI that you can right click on your desktop, click on Nvidia settings and get a very slow and outdated menu to control some 3D settings for your graphics cards. But with Radeon, it is baked into the driver. Now, I have been a huge hater of the Radeon software. Global Watt Man, its bugginess, its overhead that it uses in terms of processing power. You can actually get lower scores across the board with it open versus it closed, which you have to have it open to get accurate, truly accurate readings of things like junction temperature and edge temp and the core speed and all that sort of stuff. So it's like, open me up to see how things are running to cause me to run slower. And I've always hated the Radeon software, but it's been completely redesigned from the ground up with Adrenalin 2020. Includes things like built-in streaming software, which we're gonna do a review on because it's gonna then do all of your stream capturing at a driver level, which sounds like it could be very low overhead. So we wanna test that sort of stuff, especially if you're trying to do live streaming with something like a 5500 XT. It's got a much more user-intuitive Global Watt Man when it comes to tuning. I think they even just call it tuning now. I tested it a little bit with these cards, but for the test you saw today, all the cards were run out of the box settings, no manual overclocks, no additional boost clock, any of that. It's just how it performed out of the box. The software is something I want to do a full standalone review of, at least when it comes to things like AMD Boost or Radeon Boost, letting the software kind of dynamically adjust the resolution based on movement. So that's something we'll be taking a look at in the future, not necessarily in this review. This is a raw horsepower review when it comes to these graphics cards. The cards we chose from Nvidia, this kind of segues me back into the argument that I've sort of had recently with the whole like, Nvidia, your product stack is way too freaking crowded. We were even having a hard time trying to determine where to draw the line in the sand to cut off which graphics cards we're gonna test when it comes to tiers, because every like 30 bucks when it comes to Nvidia has a whole different tier of graphics cards that you can shop from. You've got 1650, 1650 Super, 1660, 1660 Super, 1660 Ti, and all of those are within like $30 of each other. And if you take into account the custom board variants from the AIBs, each one of those have like 3 or 4 different SKUs within that same tier, which can make it bump right up into the price or exceed the price of the next tier. Enter the GTX 1660 Gaming X that costs more money than the Super and is slower. We use this card though to represent the 1660 because one, it's the only one I have here right now. And then two, We went back and checked all of our spreadsheets of all of our testing and stuff, and it was absolutely no faster than the MSI or the EVGA 1660 Black, which is an MSRP card. It was exactly the same. So there was zero benefit to that card over an MSRP. Even though this one comes in at $249, it performs the same as the card that was like $209. So just wanted to go ahead and point that out there. But the MSRP for the 1660 Super is $229. But if we look right now at Amazon, because this is actually prior to the launch of this, Amazon has already leaked the pre-order, whatever, for the 1550, the 5500 XT. The XFX RX 5500 XT Thick 2 Pro 8 gig is $229, which puts you right at the MSRP for the 1660 Super. Now, we didn't even include the Super on this test, even though the pricing is the same, because we wanted to see how the 1660, which is the next generation or next tier up from the 1650 series that we're testing against, how this performs. So if this outperforms these cards, well, the 5500 XT cards, the Super definitely will. But it's just one of those things where it kind of shows that as much as I hate NVIDIA's product stack, it probably made sense. Anyway, let's go ahead and take a look at the benchmarks. So if we learned anything from these benchmarks, it's that the 4 gig and the 8 gig, really there's no performance difference between these two cards, which is kind of a good thing and a bad thing. And we'll talk about that in a sec. I know I was trying to balance it and that's not gonna, wait, there we go. There we go. All of our titles are at 1080p max settings. And we usually put the settings at the top of the chart if you're kind of wondering how far we push these cards. I always do max settings because I like to show you what the worst case performance scenario is gonna be so that you know it'll only go up from there. But with the exception of Red Dead Redemption 2, which is a much newer, much more demanding title, and probably, I don't know if it's less optimized or what, it is a console port, so there is that. But what I did was I took the 1650 Super, I placed it on the test bench, dialed in the presets, not any of the custom stuff that you can control in there, but just the preset slider to where I got about 60 FPS with the 1650 Super, and then locked it down there and tested the rest of the cards with the same settings. That setting happens to be the very first tick of balanced. So it's kind of weird the way Red Dead works. It's not like a 1 through 10, it's not like a low, medium, high, very high, ultra. It's favor performance, favor performance, favor performance, balance, 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 favor quality, favor quality, favor quality. It's really weird. So there's like 4 ticks of balanced in the middle. It's the very first tick, if you're wondering the one that we chose. And then obviously 1080p, no NVLink, no VSync or any of that sort of stuff. And then what we found was a little bit anomalous to where even the 1660, which is obviously faster than the rest of these cards on the table, was getting the same FPS as even like the 4 gigabyte card and the 1650 Super and all that sort of stuff. So I think that could be just title optimization. I'm not entirely sure. But with that said, you might be asking yourself why the cards we chose were on the chart. Well, it has everything to do with pricing. Or $169.99 is what the 4 gig 5500 XT is MSRP'd at. $199.99 US is what the 8 gig is priced at. So $30 delta there between both cards. Well, if you take that into account, it kind of makes the 8 gig card a lot less of a value because at least in the test that we were running, it was absolutely no difference. It was $30 towards a spec that we are not utilizing, which makes that obviously the compelling buy versus the other 1600 series cards. But if you're looking at the 8 gigabyte card, it's a weird pricing structure because AMD chose to price these cards right up against the 1660 Super pricing. Well, 1660 for sure, but 1660 Super you can have as low as $229. Now, but Jay, this is $199. That's $30 more. That doesn't make sense. Well, I don't know what these cards are going to cost yet either. You guys know the games that manufacturers play with MSRP, right? Usually the AIB cards cost more. That's because they put more R&D into it. You have custom PCBs, custom coolers, dual fans, back plates, all that sort of stuff. So it's one of those things where I don't know what this card is going to cost. I don't know if the Sapphire Pulse that I'm holding right here is going to cost MSRP. So once this video goes live and then everything hits the retailers, we'll have to see what the pricing ends up being. But if the 5500 XT 8GB ends up being anywhere near $215, $220, let's face it, they're never 15, they're never 5. It's always 209, 219, 229. They love the 9s, right? It's a way to get an extra 10 bucks without feeling like you're spending 10 extra bucks, but I digress. Then it becomes a lot less of a value because you can get better raw performance at the 1660 series, 1660 non-super even, or even a 1650 Super, because it's now definitely in the price point of a 1650 Super, and then depending on the titles will depend on where you get more FPS. Now it definitely trades blows with the 1650 Super, no problems there. 1650 handedly beats it, even the 4 gig. The 4 gig versus the 1650 non-super is a no-brainer, get the 5500. But as soon as you start taking into account custom PCBs going up against the extremely crowded product stack of Nvidia, then it gets to the point to where it becomes a lot harder of a decision to make. Not so much whether or not to get the 5500 XT versus the 1660 and the Supers, it's more so which 1660 or 1660 Super do you buy? It's never been this crowded. We've never had this many cards down at the $200-ish price point. As long as I've been doing YouTube, we've had a 50 series, a 60 series, a 70 and an 80. And that was it. And then the TI for the 80. But now we've got so many freaking cards down here. If I'm confused, what the hell are you feeling? I'm telling you right now, it's just one of those things where there's no way I could do this review and have it be 100% useful to everyone, because if you just up your budget by 10 bucks could make the difference of 10 FPS, depending on the title and depending on which card you go with. But if I were a businessman, then I would say that that was clearly the right strategic move to make in terms of pricing, because if you start having all these options and the price points, then I guess in terms of accuracy by volume, more people are gonna buy your stuff. I'm gonna have my ear to the ground and definitely see what the pricing is, because like I already said, the XFX Thick Boy was leaked on Amazon early at $230, which means you could buy a 1660 Super, like I said, for $10 less than that and get a better experience than anything you would get from the 5500. Which is kind of sad, because we need AMD to do what they did with the 5700, which is lean on Nvidia enough to have them change their strategy a little bit, like they did with bringing the 2070 back. Because remember, the 5700 XT was bumping up against the 2070 Super at a much less price. This is kind of the opposite. So sound off in the comments below. I'm sure by now you guys have seen several reviews on this card. I have not spoken to any of my colleagues. I have no idea what anyone else's opinions are of these cards. I like to kind of quarantine myself, not because I'm gassy, but because I like to kind of be uninfluenced by other people's testing and kind of come up with my own and then sort of compare notes after the fact. So you guys sound off in the comments below how you feel AMD did with this particular launch. Did they nail it with the pricing? Did they win you over? Or are you gonna jump over to something from the 1600 series simply because of performance to dollars? That's it. Thanks for watching, guys, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.